The story of Moses is full of spiritual secrets that can transform our lives, but few truly explore its deeper lessons. More than liberating Israel, Moses had remarkable moments with God, from the burning bush to the 10 Commandments. These secrets reveal how unwavering faith can change everything. Are you ready to discover what Moses saw on Mount Sinai and how that can impact your spiritual journey? If you're already curious about these powerful secrets of Moses, subscribe to the channel now and turn on notifications so you won't miss any details of this deep study. When Moses ascended Mount Sinai to receive the divine revelations of the 10 Commandments, the people of Israel, impatient with his absence, made a grave mistake. They convinced Aaron to build a golden calf, returning to idolatry. This decision was not just a betrayal of the covenant that God had established, but also a direct denial of the spiritual secrets Moses was receiving on the mountain. This image of worship represented a great spiritual downfall, a rejection of Moses' leadership and the unwavering faith he demonstrated. Meanwhile, Moses was in front of God, receiving instructions about the law and precepts that would guide the people. When he descended Mount Sinai and saw the golden calf, his anger was evident. He broke the tablets of the 10 Commandments, symbolizing the rupture of the covenant that had been made. At that moment, Moses faced a challenge in his leadership, confronted with the harsh reality of the disobedience and idolatry of a people who had been miraculously freed in the Exodus. The pain of seeing the people turn against their encounter with God was one of the hardest moments of his journey. However, despite the gravity of the sin, Moses did not give up. He turned to the power of prayer and interceded for the people, asking God not to destroy them. This episode is a profound reflection of Moses' humility and his ability to put Israel's well-being above his own. His intercession not only avoided the total destruction of the people, but also reaffirmed his divine calling as God's chosen leader to guide Israel. Moses' response teaches a great lesson in leadership: the ability to forgive and continue fighting for a greater purpose. After the sin of the golden calf, Moses, demonstrating exemplary leadership, took an unexpected step. He offered his own life in exchange for God's forgiveness for the people. He went up to Mount Sinai again to intercede for the Israelites, revealing his deep relationship with God. Moses recognized the gravity of the idolatry committed and knew that divine wrath was just, but his love for the people was so great that he was willing to sacrifice himself. His plea for forgiveness was not just a request, but a reflection of Moses' humility and unshakable faith in divine mercy. This moment also reveals something powerful about God's character. Although the people's sin was great, the Lord listened to Moses' cry, showing that fervent prayer can move spiritual mountains. Moses not only stood as a mediator, but also as an example of how the power of prayer can restore the relationship between God and his people. His intercession is reminiscent of other biblical moments where the supplication of a righteous person moved God's heart, bringing redemption and grace. Moses' leadership here teaches us that a true leader does not seek power, but is willing to serve and even sacrifice for those they lead. Moses was willing to erase his name from the book of life, something deeply symbolic, showing his total dedication to the divine calling. This attitude reinforces the importance of obedience to God and the pursuit of reconciliation in times of spiritual crisis. Once again, Moses demonstrates that even in the face of the gravest errors, there's always room for divine revelations of forgiveness and restoration. In one of the most enigmatic accounts in biblical history, Jude 9 mentions a heavenly confrontation between the archangel Michael and the devil, disputing the body of Moses. Although the Bible does not provide many details about this battle, it is clear that there is profound symbolism involving Moses' divine calling and his central role in the liberation of Israel. The fact that Satan desired Moses' body may be linked to his importance as God's chosen leader, someone who had a direct encounter with God and whose influence transcended time. Michael, the archangel, acted in the name of God, protecting Moses' body against the devil's evil intentions. This event suggests that even after death, Moses' impact on Israel's liberation and the spiritual secrets he revealed remained a threat to the kingdom of darkness. Moses was not just an ordinary prophet. He was someone who walked in intimacy with God, witnessing great miracles in the wilderness and being the mediator between God and the people. His unwavering faith and spiritual leadership made him a figure of cosmic importance, attracting even the devil's attention. This episode also reminds us of the ongoing spiritual battle around us, even if we do not see it. Moses' leadership did not end with his death. On the contrary, he continues to be a symbol of spiritual resilience. Michael's victory in this dispute illustrates the divine protection over those who, like Moses, follow the path of obedience to God. Although the devil tried to divert God's purpose, the spiritual secrets revealed by Moses continue to guide generations in their pursuit of a relationship with God. We're just getting started on these incredible revelations. If you're enjoying this, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We want to know what you're learning from Moses' story. The transfiguration of Jesus, as recorded in Matthew 17, is one of the most extraordinary moments of the New Testament, and Moses plays a central role in this scene. Alongside Elijah, Moses appears beside Jesus, symbolizing the union of the law and the prophets, a powerful connection between the old and the new. Moses' presence in this event is significant because he had been the mediator of the law on Mount Sinai, carrying with him the 10 Commandments and divine revelations. Now, he stands beside Jesus, who came to fulfill that law. This encounter is a confirmation of the continuity of Moses' divine calling and his eternal role in the story of salvation. The Transfiguration was not just a spiritual event for Peter, James, and John, but also a profound revelation about who Jesus truly was. Upon seeing Moses, the disciples understood the historical and spiritual significance of that moment, as they were in the presence of figures who represented the greatest spiritual secrets of the Old Testament. Moses, who had experienced the power of prayer and miracles in the wilderness, reinforces the importance of maintaining unshakable faith in God's promises. Interestingly, Moses, who did not enter the Promised Land during his lifetime, now appears in an event that anticipates the glory of God's kingdom. This episode also reveals how Moses' legacy transcends time. He is not only remembered for his role in the Exodus or his leadership, but for his continuous connection with the divine plan. The Transfiguration points to eternity and reminds us that those who maintain a relationship with God, as Moses did, will always be connected to God's purpose, even beyond this life. Thus, his presence on the mountain with Jesus is also a call for us to remain obedient to God and live according to divine teachings. In Exodus 33, we find the account of Moses asking to see God's glory, a bold request that reveals the depth of his relationship with God. Although no one can see God's face and live, Moses had a unique experience. God allowed him to see his back, a partial view of his glory. This moment on Mount Sinai was not just a physical manifestation of God, but a divine revelation that marked Moses forever. The leader of Israel, who had already witnessed the burning bush and so many other miracles in the wilderness, now experienced a level of intimacy with the Creator that few have ever known. This encounter reveals Moses' deep desire to know more of God, even after so many years of leadership and challenges. He wasn't satisfied with just divine instructions or the spiritual secrets that had already been revealed. Moses sought more. He wanted a deeper relationship. This teaches us about the importance of never becoming spiritually complacent. Even with unshakable faith, there is always more to know and experience in God. Moses longed for this depth, and God responded, showing that he rewards those who sincerely seek him. Moses' experience of seeing God's glory also points to the future, to the desire of every believer to one day see God face to face. Although Moses saw only a part, it was enough to transform him. His face shone so brightly that he had to cover it with a veil, a symbol of the divine revelation he had received. This episode is a powerful reminder that when we seek a deep and authentic relationship with God, He will reveal Himself in ways that can change our lives forever. Once again, Moses teaches us that true spiritual leadership comes from being in God's presence. In the wilderness, after the Israelites complained against God and Moses, venomous snakes began to attack the people, bringing chaos and death. In response to the people's plea and God's command, Moses made a bronze serpent known as Nehushtan and placed it on a pole. Those who looked at the serpent would be healed. a miracle that once again demonstrated Moses' divine calling to lead the people with wisdom and dependence on God. This event is a clear example of how God used Moses to bring divine revelations and demonstrate his power, even in the midst of Israel's rebellion. However, over time, this bronze serpent became an object of worship. The Israelites began to treat Nehushtan as an idol, distorting the original purpose for which it was created. This shows how easily idolatry can arise, even from something that was initially used for a miracle. Instead of looking to God, the people began to revere the work of their hands. Moses, who always taught the importance of a pure relationship with God free of idols, would have certainly been alarmed by this inversion of values. This episode serves as a powerful spiritual warning. Obedience to God and faith must always be directed to the Creator and not to visible things. Nehushtan, which originally symbolized the power of prayer and divine deliverance, became a symbol of spiritual deviation. Centuries later, King Hezekiah destroyed the bronze serpent, putting an end to the wrong worship. This fact reinforces Moses' leadership lesson. Even the greatest blessings can be corrupted when worship strays from the proper focus, which is always God. One of the most significant and saddest moments in biblical history was when Moses, after years of leading the Israelites through the wilderness, was prevented from entering the Promised Land. The reason behind this consequence was an episode of disobedience at Meribah. God had instructed Moses to speak to the rock for water to come out, but instead, Moses, angry with the people, struck the rock with his staff. This seemingly small act was seen as a failure to honor the holiness of God. Despite having performed many miracles in the wilderness with Moses' staff, this time obedience to God was broken. This incident reveals an important leadership lesson. Moses, a man who had a deep relationship with God and who had demonstrated unshakable faith on numerous occasions, allowed his emotions to interfere with his obedience. Although he was a notable leader, even he was subject to the same expectations of faithfulness as all the people. The consequence was severe but just. Moses would see the Promised Land from afar, but not enter it. This final moment of his leadership reflects the importance of following God's instructions precisely, regardless of external pressures. Even without entering the land, Moses continued to be an example of humility and faith until the end. He accepted divine correction and continued guiding the people with the same dedication. This episode also teaches us that despite human failures, God's plan moves forward. Moses fulfilled his divine calling until the last moment, and even without stepping into the Promised Land, his legacy of liberation, divine revelations, and faith would live on in the history of Israel. After all, the true liberation of Israel was not only territorial but spiritual, and in this, Moses was an unparalleled leader. When Moses was called by God to free the people of Israel, he faced one of the greatest challenges of his life, confronting the Pharaoh of Egypt and his magicians. Armed with his staff, which symbolized divine power, Moses performed miracles to prove the superiority of the God of Israel over the gods of Egypt. One of the most striking miracles was when his staff turned into a serpent before Pharaoh. However, the Egyptian magicians, using their own tricks, did the same. But Moses' staff, in an act that demonstrated God's absolute power, devoured the magician's serpents, clearly showing that Moses' encounter with God was real and powerful. This confrontation between Moses and Pharaoh's magicians was an intense spiritual battle. The dispute wasn't just about who had the power to perform signs, but about who had true authority. The spiritual secrets that Moses carried, given by God, were superior to any magical tricks the Egyptians could perform. Moses, with his unshakable faith, continued to perform signs and plagues that directly affected Egypt, showing that God's power has no limits. Each plague was a lesson, not just for Pharaoh but also for Moses himself, who witnessed the power of prayer in action and the fulfillment of the divine calling that God had given him. This confrontation also teaches us about perseverance in leadership. Moses didn't back down, even when faced with opposition and demonstrations of power by the magicians. He knew his mission was greater than any obstacle he might face. The divine revelations Moses received kept him firm, trusting in God's plan for Israel's liberation. The battle with the magicians was just one of many challenges he would face, but always with the certainty that as long as he remained obedient to God, victory was assured. One curious and often overlooked episode in biblical history is the moment when Moses almost lost his life for not circumcising his son. In Exodus 4, while Moses was on his way to Egypt, the Lord met him and sought to kill him. The reason? Moses, despite being the chosen leader for Israel's liberation, had not fulfilled one of the most important commandments given to Abraham's descendants: circumcision. It was his wife, Zipporah, who quickly performed the rite on their son, saving Moses' life. This event teaches us the importance of obedience to God, especially for those with a divine calling. This episode also reveals how seriously God treats his commandments, especially in the case of spiritual leaders like Moses, who was about to lead an entire nation. Moses, who had experienced many divine revelations and would have an encounter with God on Mount Sinai, was still subject to the same expectations as any ordinary Israelite. The lesson here is clear. Even the greatest leaders are not above God's law. Zipporah's intervention was decisive, showing how the role of family, even in moments of spiritual crisis, can be crucial to fulfilling God's spiritual secrets. Moreover, this event reinforces Moses' humanity. Although he performed great miracles in the wilderness and was the mediator between God and the people, he too faced personal failures and lapses in judgment. Nevertheless, in his mercy, God allowed Moses to continue with his mission. This incident illustrates the delicate balance between God's justice and grace, showing that even in moments of failure, there is space for redemption and the continuation of a relationship with God. Moses' death and burial are surrounded by mystery and reverence. After years of leadership and fulfilling a divine calling with excellence, Moses died on Mount Nebo, overlooking the Promised Land, which he was not allowed to enter. The biblical account tells us that it was God himself who buried Moses, and the exact location of his grave remains unknown to this day. This is a profound sign of the relationship Moses cultivated with God throughout his life. The fact that God personally took care of his burial reflects the uniqueness of his mission and the respect the Lord had for his faithful servant. Moses, who had led the people through the Exodus, witnessed miracles in the wilderness, and received divine revelations on Mount Sinai, left behind a legacy that transcends time. Although his body was buried in a secret place, his story continues to inspire generations. The absence of a known tomb also prevents his body from becoming an object of worship, preserving the focus on obedience to God and the spiritual legacy he left behind. His journey, marked by moments of unshakable faith and humility, reminds us that the true reward lies beyond this life. The way God took care of Moses' end of life reflects the care and honor he reserves for those who faithfully follow his calling. Even though Moses' burial is a mystery, the impact of his life is clear. He remains an example of leadership, of seeking God's spiritual secrets, and of dedication to fulfilling God's purpose. Moses' story challenges us to continue with courage, knowing that just as he was, we too can be guided by God's hand to the end of our journey. Now that you've learned the secrets of Moses, it's time to apply these lessons in your life. Subscribe to the channel for more content that will strengthen your faith and help you walk your spiritual path with more clarity.